You are now tuned in to the Storm Tracker podcast.
Welcome back, family, to the Storm Tracker podcast. Marcus Benjamin here, chilling with my guy, Frank Tucker, representing the Crib, South Florida. We collectively represent CanesCounty.com. Make sure you subscribe this weekend for free until spring. You see the promo code there, Canes24. Offer valid until Monday for you to subscribe to the website. Also, subscribe to this podcast on all platforms and subscribe to the YouTube channel as well, live from Canes County. Frank, first, I want to, talk about the running backs coach situation. We'll go into some Battle Miami stuff as well as a loaded visitor list in South Florida to Miami this weekend. But yeah, man, let's talk about this running back situation because Tim Harris Jr. has left the program to become the offensive coordinator at UCF. Of course, he came from UCF originally to become the running backs coach at Miami, stayed for a year, and now he is now out. So we have a vacancy at that spot. Happy for him because obviously, you go from running backs coach to offensive coordinator. But now Miami has to search for a replacement. When you look at who's out there, who do you think is the best guy for the job?
I think that there's definitely a bunch of options. If you look just local guys with recruiting ties to the area of South Florida, Dayton, Broward, talk Chris Perkins, who's at FAU. You talk Telly Lockett, who's I believe at Marshall right now. Those two guys that have coached in the Power 5 ranks. They have really good experience. They're extremely respected in this community. And then, there was a name that came up on social media that was intriguing to me, and that was Ryan Williams, who's at Georgia right now. He's coached multiple positions on the offense at Georgia, from quarterback to wide receiver. We know that running back position is more of a recruiting position in my eyes than it is a guy who is an integral part of calling plays and actually developing a position. Obviously, you want to develop your guys at every single spot, but I think that running back spot, if you have an idea of what's going on offense, you have an idea of how to coach running backs, and guys can grow into that position because we've seen guys that are traditional running back coaches coach tight ends and guys that can coach wide receivers. I mean, look at Tim Harris right now. He's coaching wide receivers on top of being the offensive coordinator at UCF. So on the offensive side of the ball, if you have an understanding of what's going on, you can coach anywhere on the offense. I think Ryan Williams would do an excellent job. He's a rising star in the coaching ranks. He's a young guy, around 30 years old, national championship experience. He's been with Kirby Smart for a number of years now. He knows what it takes to help get over that hump, to national championship type dreams. I think that he would be an elite addition. Another guy with local ties, former American Heritage and Miramar quarterback. To me, those would be the three spots, the three guys I'd be looking at. Obviously, Miami has a bankroll at their disposal, right? Like if you wanted to go after like a Carlos Lockett, who's at Oregon, or maybe sniff around Kevin Smith once again, even though that didn't work out the first time around. We saw him return to Ole Miss, right? So it wouldn't be outside their own possibility to see something like that happen, as crazy as it would sound. But I think that one of those three options would be safe. I think that they would be cheaper options, and I think that they would be okay coming in as potentially on even a 1 to 2 year deal and proving themselves as a quality member of this coaching staff.
The first name that came to my mind when I thought about this job was Damian Jones, man. Why not Damian Jones, the head coach of Chaminade, take this job? He wants to coach on the college level. He's a proven winner, and he continued that pipeline from Chaminade to Miami. I think he'd be a great fit. He's a great guy. I mean, he's a straight shooter. I think he's sent players to Miami throughout his tenure from to Corey Couch, who's now going on to the NFL. And I think that just would be an interesting fit. It'd be a splash type of hire, especially for those down here in South Florida. So that's kind of the first name that kind of came to my mind when I thought about the running backs job. Another one is Markel Blackwell. I mean, this guy was under Shannon Dawson at Houston, Texas A&M, and then now he's at South Carolina. And like you said, Miami does have that big bankroll. If they could, make this guy an offer that, he can't refuse, then I think he would be a really good fit as well. Considering his ties with Shannon Dawson, I believe they were co-offensive coordinators at Houston. So, he did just, go over to South Carolina from Texas A&M with the fallout there, but hey, and so did Lance Guidry, right? I mean, Lance Guidry, took a job at Tulane, and then boom, he's down here at Miami. So not out of the realm of possibility. Another name that kind of came up for me is Cadillac Williams, man. Cadillac Williams. I think he chose to resign from Auburn. He stayed with his staff last year, and he could be looking for a fresh start. I think most people kind of remember how great he was as a running back. And like you said, to your point, it's more of a recruiting type of job. And I think Cadillac Williams would definitely resonate with kids just with his experience on the college game and also in the NFL, play for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I think that those were like kind of the three names for me that I think Miami should look into. But we'll see. We'll see how it all turns out as far as that running backs position goes. Any thoughts on those guys, or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Damian Jones would be a really solid addition. Former running back. He's had a wealth of talent at the position, both at Hollandale and at Chaminade Madonna. Coach Zach Moss, Coach Davion Gallows, Thad Franklin, now Arwen Jackson, who's developing into a Power 5 prospect. Obviously, another name to think about is the American Heritage head coach. Mike over there. He's he's definitely a name to think about. Another name to kind of put out there, I think it would be a lateral move for him. It would be tough unless they gave him the co-OC title. Would be Juwan Sider. He's always a hot name that comes up when the OC position comes around, as he's trying to elevate up into the college game. He is, a Palm Beach County native from that Belglade area. From what I understand, Pahokee, I think he played at as a quarterback. But he's been at Florida, been at Penn State, has coached a number of elite backs. I think that he's a guy that if Mario wanted to pull the big bag out, right, and wanted to grab a splash at the running back position with the potential co-OC title, maybe like a run game coordinator title, you could bring a Juwan Sider in. So that would be something interesting to see. But I don't think it happens. But it just wouldn't be shocking to me just because of the South Florida ties. And then listen, James Franklin is kind of on the hot seat. They've struggled against top 5 teams, which Penn State is trying to get over that hump to compete with the Ohio States and the Michigans of the world. I think he's 1-11 against top 5 teams in his coaching career. Not exactly the standard of what Penn State is looking for. But I think that is something that's intriguing to me just because of the situation at Penn State right now, his ties to the area, and Miami's wealth. that's been that's been flowing through the program since Mario Cristobal has been hired.
Absolutely, and well documented as well. So we'll see how it all turns out. But this weekend, huge weekend for Miami when it comes to recruiting. So many top tier players will be visiting Coral Gables this weekend because of Battle Miami, one of the biggest 7-on-7 tournaments in the country. Is going on this weekend. So it's a golden opportunity for Miami to get kids on campus and really kind of show them around, establish some relationships, especially the kids that are from out of town. You saw the list. You put together the list on CanesCounty.com. Make sure you check that out. Of course, you have to be a subscriber to check that out, which one of these out of town kids, and it could be just, in state, just out of town, are really kind of the must impress guys? You got to impress these guys during this weekend. Which guys are these for you?
Yeah, so I have an in-state, out-of-town guy that I love, getting on campus, and I think that there's going to have to be a progression there if Miami's going to want to stay in the game. In-state wise, it's Vernell Brown, from Orlando Jones. He's right at the top of that as being option number one at that wide receiver position. He's not a massive player, around 5'10", 5'11", 170, 175 pounds, but it's an explosive talent. He is just an elite slot type receiver. Miami does want to get a little bit longer at that slot spot, and if he's truly around that 5'11" to 6 foot range, he fits the mold of what Miami is looking for, right? Like a Nycard type player, and that's what he is. Extremely productive. Was dominant this season as a true breakout player. We saw him in the summer at the 7-on-7s on campus, dominated there. He's wowed the staff, and I think he's become a must get for this staff in 2025. The other guy that I like that's an out-of-state option is Zayden Walker, the number 2 linebacker in the country. This is option number 1 at the linebacker position outside of Elijah Melendez for the staff. And I listen, I think that, despite the fact that Miami added a wealth of talent, 2 cycles ago at the linebacker position, some of those guys haven't worked out in regard to where they were ranked as high school prospects, right? We haven't seen the transition onto the field as quickly as we'd like, with some of those guys. And I think that, sometimes there's misses, right? You took a lot of guys in one cycle. Derek Nicholson came on late in that, after I believe that they signed an early signing day. So for me, I think that maybe some of those guys don't exactly fit what he was essentially looking for. And Zayden Walker does. Elijah Melendez and Zayden Walker are 2 solid size, elite athletes, physical players, aggressive, they're firecrackers. At the point of contact, they're blasting through you. You don't see guys getting slung down by either of these players. They're going backwards. And Zayden Walker is probably the best linebacker in the country, in my opinion. And I think that he's option number 1 on the board for this staff. It's going to be a huge visit. Obviously, he's a Georgia native, so you're going to see teams like Georgia, Alabama, even though there's no Nick Saban, still be on there. Every top team in the country is going to be after Zayden Walker. And if Miami wants to still have skin in this game, they're going to have to make a strong impression here. And I think that Coach Derek Nicholson is going to be spending a lot of time this weekend with him to make sure he knows he's a priority for the staff going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree about Zayden Walker. I mean, he definitely looks the part, and he'd be another valued linebacker to this class to pair with Elijah Melendez. Miami's still looking at other linebackers as well when it comes to TJ Alford, as well as Montrez Walker as well. It looks like Miami's going to haul in another solid linebacker class like they did 2 cycles ago. For me, the outside of South Florida guys, I think that are must gets. DJ Pickett, man. Yeah, I think you gotta get him in. I think with the connection with Booker Pickett now, who seems like probably was underrated from what we've seen in the All-Star games, and looks like he's going to be a contributor like a Ruben Bain did last year. So I think he is a high priority. Especially at that safety position. I think he's more of a free safety, rangy type of safety that I don't necessarily see on the squad as far as like young talent is concerned. I think he would fill in a need for sure and just kind of establish that position for the future. Another kid I like is Zaire Addison, man, the offensive lineman out of Sumner. I think he's a guy that Miami should solidify. I think Miami didn't put, all their chips in the offensive line last cycle, only bringing in a few guys. And I think this is a cycle where they kind of ramp it up a little bit more. And I think he should be a guy that Miami puts a high priority to. So I like what I see from him on tape, and I think he should be a high priority for the Canes this weekend. But we have obviously these out of town guys, but local guys, man. Of course, probably nobody besides maybe Larry Bluestein knows more about local talented more than you, Frank. Of the local guys, who's a must get for Miami that's visiting this weekend?
Yeah, there's two. I think that they're kind of one and the same for me, and it's once again at that wide receiver position. I think it's Nashawn Montgomery and I think it's Cortez Mills. They both play for the same 7-on-7 team. They're both high priority players, around 6'2", really good length, can run the tree. They're elite outside talents, and that's where Miami needs to get better at, because you're going to lose Jacoby George after this year, right? We don't know what Isaiah Horton is just yet. Yes, you got Chance Robinson. I think that JoJo Trader is going to be a guy that moves around from the slot to the outside, especially as Miami transitions more and more into that air raid attack that is truly under Shannon Dawson probably next year, in my opinion. I think that you need to start adding more and more outside talent, especially smooth outside talent with jump ball ability that both of these guys bring to the table. If you go watch Nashawn Montgomery last year, the first thing that pops off was the one-handed Odell Beckham type catch that he makes early on in the year against Monsignor Pace. And then Cortez Mills, every time you turn around, he's making a highlight reel grab over two defenders, sometimes three. They are the jump ball type players that Miami's going to need in this offense moving forward. And I think that those are two priority gets. At the running back position, they already have a lot of talent there. I think that you got your guy at Luke Nickel. I know that they're still kind of dabbling at that spot. You've brought in double-digit offensive linemen in the last two classes. I think that they're going to ramp it up, like you said, in regards to targeting elite talent at the position. Defensive line-wise, you saw what they did in this past cycle, right? Like inside talent, outside talent at the defensive line spot. It was elite across the board. Linebacker-wise, I mentioned Zayden Walker. I think that he's a priority. Plus, you have Elijah Melendez. You did speak about DJ Pickett. I think CJ Ewald is another guy that you can kind of loop into as a must-get local prospect. But I think that's going to be a longer game just because of his recent decommitment from Michigan. I don't think he's jumping into anybody's class anytime soon. But I think that Nashawn Montgomery and Cortez Mills are guys that probably make a decision before the summer. And right now it is high priority to make sure that you let these guys know that they are must-gets. And I think that, teams like Clemson, right, Nebraska with Cortez Mills' connection with his former head coach that is now on staff there, right? Like Florida State is pushing hard for both guys, right? Now you're starting to see Florida double back and get into South Florida after, Andy Jean was a guy that they sold from Miami 2 classes ago. I think that you have to get these guys in the boat sooner than later. Because if you can grab a trio that looks like a Waden Charles, a Nashawn Montgomery, and a Cortez Mills, you look really good at that wide receivers position going forward. Because that means in the last 2 classes, you were able to grab Nye Carr, Chance Robinson, Josiah Trader, Nashawn Montgomery, Waden Charles, and Cortez Mills. Not even talking about Robbie Washington and Nathaniel Ray Joseph, who you grabbed the class before. That makes it so that the wide receivers position is once again extremely talented at the University of Miami. And it means that you're grabbing the top guys in the area. We've wrote countless articles on this website about how Miami has failed to grab the number 1 receiver in the area and feels like a millennium, right? Like Jeremiah Smith, you were this close, right? You were this close. I would probably argue that those are the top 2 guys locally at the wide receivers position, Nashawn Montgomery and Cortez Mills. You can interchange the 2. I think Kobe Howard's another guy that you can kind of put in that conversation. Maybe Josh Moore, but I would probably say, like, consensusly, everybody's saying Cortez Mills and Nashawn Montgomery. And I think that they're must-gets because you have to start turning the tide of grabbing the best guy at that position. They've done it at almost every other spot except for quarterback. It's time to turn the page at the wide receiver position going forward.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, man. I think this 2025 wide receiver class from South Florida in particular is you could compare it with any area in the nation, especially with the players that you named with Nashawn Montgomery, Wade Charles was already committed to the class, Cortez Mills, and um, forget who the other player was, but yeah, like I think Miami has to get those players, or at least get three of those guys, man, because it's it's not as clear cut who the number one guy is. I think for the past 2 years, it's very clear cut that Jeremiah Smith was number one, and for the year before that, it was very clear that Brandon Ennis was the number one guy. This time around, I think you have an argument of who is really the number one wide receiver. Uh, when we see them perform tomorrow at Battle Miami, we'll really kind of maybe have a better understanding of who really the top wide receiver guys are. And I think they definitely need to get at least three of those guys. I already got one in the fold in Charles, but if they can get a Montgomery or a Mills or even a Josh Moore, that would be outstanding just for recruiting for that 2025 class and just recruiting locally. Some guys that I just think that are must gets, man. When I look at the list that's are visiting this weekend, Ezekiel Marcelin, man, I don't think that Miami can ill afford to let him slip through the cracks here because, yeah, they're looking at guys like linebackers that we talked about, but got to keep that Miami Central pipeline going. Him and Randy Arterica, I think those guys are absolute must gets for Miami. TJ Alford, we also talked about as well. Kobe Howard was the other guy that you mentioned that I wanted to reiterate that guy is high priority as well. Kamari Williams as well is a player that I think Miami should also consider just in case they don't get some of these other guys that are higher on the board. And the two running backs from American Heritage, I think you got to get one, man. You got to either get DeAndre Desenor or Byron Lewis. I think one of those two guys. I think you have to add to the class. I think you have to continue that pipeline from American Heritage, especially with the production that Mark Fletcher has done in year one. I think that resonates with those two guys. They know that they can contribute right away. And I think they see the production, by Fletcher, and they can replicate that once they get to the U. So I think those guys are definitely priorities. Other guys, I think they need to also have on the radar locally: Amari Wallace, Ben Hanks, Sekou Smith. Of course, they're on the deep to back ends, but I think those guys they have to kind of make sure they keep strong relationships with those guys because I think all 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 three of those guys I think are in for huge senior seasons. So, I mean, we talked about basically local guys, out of town guys, and after a big weekend like this, you kind of assume somebody's going to commit, right? I feel, you kind of feel it like somebody's going to commit. Somebody's going to be blown away by this visit this weekend, and they are going to commit either Sunday or Monday or sometime during the week. You feel like that's going to happen, right, Frank?
I don't know. I feel like every year we do this to ourselves, right? Coming out of that junior day weekend, it's like, oh, we need this many kids to pledge after the weekend. You have to make a strong impression. I'm not a big fan of coming out of a weekend with the commit because I don't think that it's genuine. You were just the last guy in the hottest girl at the bar's ear, right? You're not the next guy, right? So there's going to be that opportunity to kind of sway a kid. I want to come out of this weekend being like in double-digit kids, top 3. That's really what it is going to be the most important thing for me. Solidifying things with kids like Alvin Henderson, because you don't really know what that situation is, because the big influence was Kevin Riley was committed, right? And I still think that, Miami's still in the cards, but now you've had a running back coach change, right? Now you lost Kevin Riley in the 2024 class. Where are things at with an Alvin Henderson, right? Where are things at with the Vernell Brown, right? Like, where are things at the quarterback position in 25 and 26? I want to be at the top of the game for a lot of the top guys, because Miami for a long time took guys just to take guys. And I felt like they did that early on in that 2024 class, right? A lot of rumors came out that Miami, they liked some of their evaluations, but later in that process, right, when it was Justin Scott's and Zaquan Patterson's and Josiah Traders, and you were grabbing 4- and 5-star high-end players, not everybody in the class was just that. I don't think that Miami wants to take guys just to take guys anymore. And we've heard, rumors that Miami has turned away commitments over the past few months because they want to take the right guys. I don't necessarily know if all the right guys that they want are going to be guys that are going to be committing anytime soon. They want the elite players in college football. They're trying to be where Georgia is right now. They're trying to be where Ohio State is right now. They're trying to be where Alabama has been. And to get to that spot, you have to take the right players. I just want to be gaining momentum with a lot of these guys, especially coming off a season where he finished 7-6, and continue pushing towards having another top 5 class in 2025.
I hear you 100%. But we'll see. It's always fun to dream and always fun to kind of predict like what's going to happen next week. But, if I had to bet money that somebody's going to commit next week, I'd probably bet some money on it. I'd probably bet 1 unit on that, and I've been betting on the playoff games this week, and I've been feeling good about it, not too big, but like I've been hitting on like player props these days. I've been kind of staying away from the actual game because that hasn't been working so well, but player props, those have been doing really well for me. Like my player prop for the AFC Championship game, Patrick Mahomes over 4.5 carries, bro. He's going to carry the ball over 4.5 times. He is going to try to make stuff happen. That's just an extra little nugget for people who watch this podcast, but that's the one I'm banking on. So
now, if I was gonna bet, if you asked me, if you put a gun to my head and said, Frank, who do you think commits this after this weekend? I would say it would be a local guy. I would say it would be like an Ezekiel Marcelin. I would say it'd be like a Randy Adarica. I would probably say, one of the guys at American Heritage potentially, right? I would probably go that route rather than like a quarterback, right? Rather than one of the receivers. Maybe a Nashawn Montgomery. I heard last year that there was potential that he could commit last football season, right? So he's a guy I'd be watching for. I don't think Cortez Mills is there yet. I wouldn't be surprised if Miami came out of it with an offensive lineman because of what Alex Mirabal and Cristobal do. There's a Grant Wise who just announced that he's going to be visiting, want to pledge early on in his process. Those are guys I'd be watching for. I don't think any like the 5 or high-end 4-star guys that Miami is like, this is a guy we need, like a Zayden Walker or Vernell Brown, who's top 200, top 250 right now. Maybe not as high as a Nashawn Montgomery, but like I don't see those guys locking in. Hudson Longstreet, like I don't think he locks in, right? Like Noah Grubbs, I don't think Noah Grubbs locks in. I think it's probably going to be more one of those local guys that's been on the hook for a long time, and Miami just kind of pushes things over the top.
I hear you. I believe you too, and we'll see how it all shakes out next week. Battle Miami though. Who do you think flashes, man? Like, every time we leave Battle Miami, every time I leave, I'll speak for myself, I leave thinking like, whoa, this kid is unreal. Like, I think, was it last year? No, the year before was Nico. I am Leva. I can't get that guy's name right.
Nico Iamaleava.
Yeah, that kid, I was like, whoa, this kid is the real deal. And he's going to be the starter for Tennessee, starting next season. Last year, I mean, there was a bunch of kids that I thought was really good. I thought TJ Moore was really good from last year. I thought a lot of the local guys. I thought Zaquan was outstanding last year in Battle Miami. Who do you think like really flashes during Battle Miami this weekend?
I'm obviously biased as a South Florida guy, but I think there's going to be a guy that continues his momentum from the season into 7-on, and he becomes a blue chip prospect. He's already got the offer train rolling a little bit, and that's Khalil Sterling out of Miami Central. I think that for Raw Miami, he's going to be a guy that just blows up the 7-on-7 season. He's fast. The comparison I have for him is a little bit of a shorter version of Antonio Brown. He is electric when the ball's in his hand. He can run the full tree, elite hands. He's
Antonio Brown.
Antonio Brown. Listen, Antonio Brown came out of Miami Norland, right? Was an electric talent that was super underrated. Yes, there were some off-field issues there, but Khalil Sterling to me is going to be a guy that ends up at like an Oregon, who's now offered. He ends up at a Penn State. He ends up at a high-end school like that, and I think that Miami eventually will be in that conversation. And he blows up. I think that he has top 150 potential regardless of position. I think he's going to be a 1,200-yard receiver for Miami Central in the following, season. He already had like double-digit touchdowns this year. I think he has a stupid 7-on-7 season, and I think it starts this weekend. I think he has some viral moments, right, where he's going to make an acrobatic catch. He's going to absolutely drop somebody on a short area route. He's that type of player to me, and I think that he's one of those guys that's just massive riser going forward.
Yeah, for me, local kid, man, I think Bryce is really just going to show his versatility. Bryce Fitzgerald, I think he's really going to show on both sides of the ball just how great he is. I think he keeps getting better as a receiver. I think he shows a lot of great body control when the ball is in the air. And as a DB, he can play both safety, he can play corner. And I think they'll probably move him around a little bit. I think he's a guy who definitely kind of shows up big. And I think based on his performance, I think he could be one of those guys who ends up committing to Miami after the weekend because he's very high on the Hurricanes. I think he's a guy who continues to make a big splash this weekend at Battle Miami. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for the Storm Tracker podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the website, canescounty.com, for free until spring. Use the promo code Canes24. Also, subscribe to this podcast on all platforms. Also, of course, subscribe to this YouTube channel, live from Canes County. Until the next episode.